Happy mid-September, sometime this month. My Jets will hopefully have pulled off a win. I'm joking. I'm joking. Welcome to the Application to Admission podcast. I am your co-host, Shareem Herndon Brown of Strategic Admissions Advice. I'm also the co-author of the Black Family's Guide to College Admission, a conversation about parenting. What is it about? Parenting, education, and race. And
It's education, parenting, and race.
See, and that is be the other guy who wrote the book with me, who always got something to say. Just because I remixed it a little bit, he don't like that. But Timothy Fields is here as well. How are you feeling, my hopefully well-traveled, very busy senior assistant dean of admission at Emory counselor, whatever you want.
Hey, tis is the season. Tis is the season. It's busy. I've already been to New York, Chicago, LA, headed to Anaheim, Boston. So yes, it is the season. A lot of conferences that are happening. Actually headed next week to NACAC in LA. Hopefully I will see you there. Are you coming? I know you don't like to fly out to the West Coast, but
I don't. To my West Coast people, it's not you. It's the flight. It's not you. I love my West Coast people. It's just I don't like being in the air that long.
Just fly private, man.
I will be there. I will be there, and I will be hanging out with you. And I think there's going to be a lot of good topics of conversation at NACAC, which is short for the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. There's our national conference where Tim and I were actually awarded last year for this said podcast, Application to Admission. It was in Baltimore. So this year we go as pedestrians, I guess. But there's going to be a lot of good conversations about artificial intelligence, the FAFSA, and drum roll, please, the Supreme Court decision on race conscious admissions and the data that's coming out. Tim, you got any initial thoughts about this data about how it's affecting college admissions for Black folks?
I mean, it's coming out, and it all depends upon the type of institution. I think if we are sticking to our mantra that we have to kind of redefine success, that it matters to about 5% of institutions in this country. The rest of schools are continuing going about the work they are doing, but a very small select schools get a lot of attention. And so, yeah, we'll talk about how it affects those applicant pools, and that'll come out. But by and large, a lot of great schools in this country that students and families can attend. And I think that's a conversation that we should take away.
Okay, well, I love the way you approach this as a true educator, someone who wants to share the information, share the wealth. And with that kind of tickle your fancy, little drop of information about the data, we have a data specialist as a guest today on our podcast. Tim, did you know that we had a real math data nerd on our podcast today?
I mean, I'm not going to use those terminology, but if that's
he embraces it. He embraces it. He embraces his expertise in numbers.
I don't know about expertise, but I do like numbers to add up properly.
Okay, hey,
I also will point out that Tim be dipping into my city without so much as a "Hey, homie, what's up?" And I gotta find that on Instagram.
Get used to it. He's like that.
Whoa! And the voice you hear that is not Shareem's or mine is a friend of the show. Back one more time, but we felt it was so timely. Akil Bello, testing expert, higher education extraordinaire, father of a first-year college student, all the things that he is back to share with us. And we thank him for coming back and thank him for all the support he's given. He also, Shareem, hey, he wrote a foreword of a book.
Hey, that's what they tell me. I heard he got paid for it too. No, let me stop. Then Akil's a friend of the show because he's good people. And again, going through the process with us, he for a lot of good reasons, we wanted him to write the foreword to our second edition because the man knows his stuff. So we are always appreciative of your company, always appreciative of your time, and again, can't wait to chop it up with you later in the month. And California love. That's how I sing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So Akil, I mean, there's a lot to get to, but we're gonna start off. Last year at this time, you were beginning the process as a father. You knew you and your family were going through. Your oldest son was a senior. So in reflecting back, if you had to somebody say this is one thing I think you should know before you begin the process as a senior, what would you tell parents out there who are about to get in this process themselves?
Oh,
it could be 2, 3. I mean,
yeah. I'm trying to figure out what that thing would be. So
you're never at a loss for words, so this must be right.
I'm just trying to frame this right. I hate sounding like a commercial, but I'm gonna go ahead and sound like a commercial. Okay. Sure. I spoke to Shireen early. And for me, the best part of the process was because of Shireen, we had 3 wins in December. He told us to apply to several schools that did rolling admissions. It wasn't early decision. It was they respond when they get applications. So in December, we had 3 yeses.
It took some of the pressure off.
It takes a lot of the pressure off. It made for an entirely different experience where the question wasn't, are you going? Are you happy? Is there options? It was which options? And that made an entirely different process as you get towards the end of the year. So
I like that.
That was really revealing to me to just realize how much stress that relieves.
Thank you. And we can use that as a commercial, strategicadmissionsadvice.com. No, let me stop with it. No, Akil, I think what you just said was very, very powerful. And we'll even go deeper now. The Common Application just released that they have direct admissions, right? So there's even direct admissions that are really getting popular now, where kids can find out almost instantaneously if they get in. Again, this, as Tim mentioned earlier, this is going to be for the super elite, as Akil calls them, rejective colleges. But of the 4,000 college universities, the 2,000 that give out bachelor's degrees in this country, we like to think that kids can have options, plural. And the only way to do that is to execute the process on the front end, September, October, November, and use direct admissions appropriately. And I think your kid can have wins that psychologically they're able to phrase differently. So I'm glad that worked out for you.
Yeah. No, it was surprising how helpful that was.
Strategicadmissionsadvice.com. All right, I got it.
I will also say I'm mad at both of y'all for not telling me about the portal hell.
The FAFSA portal or the people 8 schools?
Every single one of them. There are 19 million portals for all the things.
Yes.
Get a spreadsheet. Expect that after Common App, there's a portal for each individual university where you might have to put in something more. And when they're accepted, there's another portal. So you got to track it all. It was such a pain trying to comb through my email, his email, everybody's email, try to find out where you log into what thing. That was a lot.
So just a real practical question. I know a lot of people suggest getting a separate email for this process. Did your son get a separate email for his college admission process? Did y'all have a family email? Kind of walk us through what that looked like.
Yeah, it was hard. So yes, there was an email created that was separate for this process. I did not use it effectively. So most email ended up going to my son's high school email, which I don't think is the best approach, but that's where we ended up. The email I created, that I might have created 2 years ago, with the intent of filtering out a lot of the marketing and all of that sort of stuff, we ended up not logging into as much. It actually was last time I checked, there were 7,000 emails in there from colleges. Since the moment he took maybe the PSAT or the ACT the first time, all the spam went there and we just stopped checking it. I should have created filters and done a whole lot of stuff with it earlier, but I just sort of gave up on it because for the most part, it captured marketing email addresses and we shifted over everything serious to his school email address. And I just started checking that with him.
Got it. So y'all went through the process, and obviously he's in school doing well. I assume you talked to him, and he's making the most of the situation. So as y'all went through the process, y'all had a lot of options in the spring. Each family is different, but was there any one particular thing that it came down to for you all to make your decision on where he ended up?
Yeah, I mean, the things that guided his applications and where we applied ultimately determined what his final choices, right? He was looking for business programs, preparation for graduate school, because he's thinking about graduate school, opportunity to play basketball, and a particular schools. And so when we got down to those final choices, they didn't change very much. We started looking at they all had the major he wanted, but you can dig into who gives the most degrees in this area, who has sort of more of that major, who has more focus on that major. Is it the first major at an institution, or is it the fifth major at the institution? We could be happy with first or fifth, but if you have a choice between first or fifth, and this is their primary focus, that's going to make a difference. So things like that started making the difference. He also visited, and he liked the students better that he met at one place than another. And so that made some of the difference as well. So most of our visits took place after he was admitted.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And no regrets. Like, again, if one of the questions we may get to later on, we're going to chop it up with you. Again, this is Akil Bello with the official title of Director of Advocacy for Fair Test and, among other things, college admission specialist. But the bottom line is, Akil, is what regrets do you have about your parental journey through the college admissions process that you either weren't expecting or just kind of like, I'll do this differently with my next kid?
Yeah, most of the regrets is that I'm not organized enough. My wife is the organizer in the family, and I'm not the organizer.
And there's a lot of administrative stuff, right? Again, people forget that this process is not just leave it up to your kid and give them their computer and say, go apply to college. There has to be family conversations, which I'd love to know when you guys designating that time. But the process needs an executive assistant. Yes or no?
Yeah. And so it's kind of funny. So you helped out a bit. So part of the problem I had was I know too many people in this space. So I thought I was going to do it by myself. You helped us get us started. You organized. You did some stuff. Like, I should have actually handed it off to you so that there wasn't the parental dynamic of organizing it. Because I don't know if you said this to me, but somebody said this to me at some point. The kids are used to ignoring their parents, right? Like, there's a parental dynamic of go clean your room, pick up your clothes. They're just used to you harping at them. They're used to listening to their teachers and hitting their teachers' deadlines. So that dynamic of parent versus somebody I have something to turn in for is a different dynamic. And it's hard to make that switch in year 16. So simply for the organizational part of it, I probably should have just said somebody else manage the process. It would have made our lives easier. Now, in the end, it worked out fine, right? But it would have made my life easier. And since I had the opportunity to do it, I just should have. I didn't like, in my head, college counseling, school counseling, all of that is about the knowledge of colleges. That's sort of what my head was. And it's not really just that. Like I say in a second, Shereen knows colleges better than I do. I know college data. I don't know colleges. I don't know what it feels like to be on X campus versus Y, right? In the way that you do. I overlooked the organizational value of somebody else to help manage the process.
And so it sounds like it. And Tim, I know you're chomping at the bit with some good technical questions. We're going to move up the parenting thing, but we appreciate your honesty, authenticity, vulnerability. There's something to be said, yes, that we all got to take a step back because of the emotional roller coaster of this process with your teenager. They're seeking some, independence. Parents, we're seeking some control over our money, over the kid who we know better than they know themselves. So many moving parts that at some point, and Tim, I think you've been saying this as an educator, and let's see what happens when you go through it. But you have to partner with your kid on this. You want to elaborate on that, Tim?
No, I mean, I think, I've been saying this a lot. I said it this morning. I was at a fair this past weekend. That as parents go through this, really, you have to, partner with your school. You have to partner with your child. That there are all kinds of inputs that are coming into going about this decision, and it just can't solely be on one person. It can't be like, oh, this is a student, do your work, apply to school, you'll get it done. Because depending upon if you apply for financial aid or not, or whatever your situation is, then the parent dynamic comes in. And then you'll always have to have a letter at most schools from a college counselor. So then there's a college counselor. College counselors, many say, school counselors say, hey, this is the list you should be building. So there are all these different dynamics at play, and what the student wants may not be what the parent wants, may not be what the college counselor, school counselor suggesting. So all these things are at play. And so that's why it's important to partner and have some bigger conversations. And then, if you throw independent college consultant in there, then you really stirring the pot up as far as who knows the most in the process and what they should do. So it's complicated, but I think it's definitely something that should have organization. I think is definitely something that should be part of the process. But all I know, I see the end product. That's why I'm interested in see what it looks like on the front end, because I get that it's been polished and put together, and then I evaluate. So it's interesting to get the perspective of kind of the planning, preparing, and all the conversations that go ahead of time.
Yeah, it can definitely be labor intensive. All right, let's shift some gears a little bit, because when we got the man of the intellectual caliber of Akil Bello, we want to make sure we pick his brains about the data. So, Akil, give us your initial feelings on the early returns about the Supreme Court decision on race conscious admission and how it's affecting, albeit a small percentage of schools. It's the schools that we talk about. It's the schools that are on people's minds. As Tim and I are learning, there are people who are discreetly, I don't want to lead the witness. You tell us what you think is going on and how parents can adjust accordingly if this pertains to them.
I think parents should ignore it entirely.
Ha!
No, seriously. If you're an 11th, 12th grade parent, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? Like, not apply to somewhere because their numbers are low? Right? And if that's your choice, I don't think it changes anything. I created a spreadsheet when we were looking into schools. Every school he put on the list, every school he mentioned, I threw on the list, and I auto-populated the data that I was interested in. The percentage of Black students, the typical financial aid. So I populate all the data. I'm looking at the school. That won't change because of the Supreme Court, right? And all data is historic data. So I don't really know what it means next year, but it gives me a perspective, right? So I think parents should be hyper vigilant to, is this somewhere my child wants to go and I want to send my child based on all the things. I think a lot of the problems come in when people spend a lot of time worried about will they get in. That's secondary, that's tertiary, that's almost irrelevant. You don't know if they will get in or not until you apply. Now, there is a limited number of applications you can send out and maintain some sort of reasonable sense of, I'm not insane here. But until you get close to that, why are you worried about it? Right? So I think that as far as a parent and a student is concerned, the Supreme Court stuff is noise, right? So I would start there for parents. As far as policymakers are concerned, the caution I have is it is really early. Last year was a big mess. Any conclusions drawn should be drawn with asterisks up the wazoo. Right? How do we know? Let's take MIT, for instance, right? So last year, 3 things changed. Last year was the second year of test scores being required once again. Last year was the FAFSA mess. And last year was the Supreme Court. Which of those things affected their results? They just put out a post that basically said it was the Supreme Court. I feel like that seems a lot of weight to put on the Supreme Court without telling us we changed nothing internally. If you tell me that's the only thing that changed internally, cool. If you tell me that nobody stopped applying because they couldn't fill out FAFSA, okay, I can start to agree. But we don't have none of that information. So to go full chested and say Supreme Court seems like a lot, right? So I urge caution. I also find it interesting the results are different across institutions. right? Some institutions are not down. Some institutions are down in Asian, up in white, down in black, neutral in this. So it's not consistent across institutions, which makes sense. Different institutions behaved differently as a result of the court case. So once again, to go ahead and think the court case did this is not only premature, probably irresponsible. And I think anyone who comes out full chest and be like, the Supreme Court did this, I'm stopping listening to them. That's the end of our conversation. That's like saying, the reason I went out with this person is the dress they had on. Like that's a part of it, but to ignore all the other things, to just say this one thing, that seems simplistic. And I try not to listen to simplistic people.
So right now, we have a lot of parents who are, contacting us saying, "Hey, we're looking at these numbers. Not as many, underrepresented Black students are being admitted. What does that mean for our students? What should we be doing?" And what would you tell them? What should they do because of these decisions that they see happening, and is throwing all this kind of anxiety into the process because it's really happening at the selected schools, and they're seeing the MITs and other schools of the world that have a decline in Black admission, and say, "Oh my goodness, my student's not going to get in."
Ask MIT what they're doing differently. I would. So, let me not pick on MIT, right?
Yeah. I was gonna say,
MIT brought this on themselves by being first. If I was MIT, I'd have been quiet. I'd just wait. Like, being first, you attract all the attention, right? So, to me, a parent needs to make the decision of, is this an environment in which I want to send my child? That's the only decision they need to make. Otherwise than that, nothing else changes. If your child had their heart set on MIT for the last 57 years, and all of a sudden you see that their percentage of Black students has dropped by 15%, you are now not going to send them? That's probably not true. That doesn't, like, the institution hasn't changed, right? Now, I might put some questions to MIT and say, "Hey, why did those numbers go down? What are you doing differently? What's and see how they respond to those things and see if that changes my impression, right?" But the education there hasn't changed. So to me, I look at it the same way as I look at I don't know, Chipotle raised their prices. So I got a choice to make. Either I'm going or I'm not. It's not really that hard. Like, they did the thing, and it's on them to justify them doing it, but it's on me to decide whether I'm participating or not. Parents can't control that, right? You can't control that. That's where policy and advocacy and all those things come in. I might challenge the institution to do better, right? If I'm in a position of power to raise it to people in power to do better, to explain themselves, those sort of things, great. But I'm a parent, I'm an applicant. I don't have that power. My power is in apply or not. Speak out maybe or not, right? I don't think 12th grade parents should be thinking about policy in that way.
Because it's not going to affect them, particularly in the short term. It's outspoken if nothing else. You always say. I hear you. It's a good point.
Yeah, hey, I got to navigate the system with my kid. I've got to do what's best for my child. So that should be the primary concern for parent, doing what's best for your child. Now, if a school goes from, if Morehouse suddenly has 6% Black, we got questions.
Big questions, right?
But but I don't know if I really, as a parent, right, which is different than as a policy advocate, right? As a parent, I don't know that I care that, like, it's a different question for me to say Amherst goes from 8% to 5%. That's a different question for me.
Okay. Given the state of testing, again, you mentioned MIT. We won't kind of belabor that point. Going back to testing, what do you think of the current state of testing in college admission, with so many elite, selective, whatever word you want to use, returning to testing? Give us your fall 2024 overview of the state of testing in college admission.
I think the conversation has shifted poorly. The conversation has shifted to should we keep up with the Joneses? I think that the schools that have returned to testing have been framing their decisions in ways that are bizarre to me.
That I can concur, yes.
Right? In framing their decisions in ways that the data doesn't seem to support, to my mind. Right? To say we need tests so that we can predict who's going to get a first year 3.6 instead of a 3.8. I just ask why. Like, I don't care. My son come to me and tell me he got a 3.6, not a 3.8. I'm like, I just don't care. That all sounds lovely. Like I'm super. Like, imagine your kid coming to you and say, "I graduated college with 3.6." Like, who among us is not turning a carbon? Right? Like, woo! Like,
Akil, I mean, I don't want what you're saying to go over anybody's head. You say the difference between a 3.6 and 3.8. Can you kind of talk about, what the data that's coming out, that says that this is the difference in predictions of test scores in your college GPA? Can you just dig into that a little bit so people really understand what you're saying?
Let's go really simply. College Board, the people who make the SAT, say that below 1,000 on the SAT, so slightly below average, predicts, I believe, a 3.0 freshman GPA. Okay? So as in doing well and a full point above academic probation. You go up the scale, we predict a GPA more, right? So, or you predict higher GPAs. So let's say a 1,500, almost a perfect SAT, correlates to a 3.6 GPA, right? So almost the best score predicts a freshman GPA of 3.6. Why do we care? These are all students who are doing pretty well freshman year. So for me, the question is, if you're requiring a test, if you're requiring students to put in time, money, effort, creating a $2 billion test preparation and testing industry so that you can predict GPAs just a little bit better, the cost doesn't justify the benefit to me. Right? Now, if there were a test that said below this number, you are going to fail out your first year, I'm fully on board. I want that test, right? And so the 3.6 versus 3.8, I believe, was Dartmouth's numbers in justifying returning to the test. They were saying below a certain number, or those who didn't submit, they had a freshman GPA of 3.6. They weren't as, they started framing it as not successful and words like that. Which to me is like, that's successful. That is higher than the GPA I graduated college with. That's higher than the GPA many of us graduated college with. So it seems.
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself.
We know he didn't graduate with no 3.8. We know that.
Actually,
we know that.
I've said it in some keynotes. I graduated with I don't think my GPA was a 3 anything. I also worked full time during college, or darn near. So I think there's so many things that go into that. It's weird to me to use the SAT you take in junior year of high school to predict college graduation 6 years later. Right? I worked 30 hours a week during college. You know what impacted my GPA? Working, not spending time building the models to get my bachelor's of architecture. The SAT had nothing to do with that.
Is your son working in college this year as a freshman?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You are a student, be a student.
Interesting.
So all right. So we had that out there. So what advice as families who are thinking about this process, should they take the test or they should not take the test? What advice do you have as pertains to, I have a junior, I have a senior, we're applying to these schools, they're test optional, but we want to take the tests. Should they take the test? What advice do you have for families thinking this testing through?
So the advice for families to me is always the same. The advice is give yourself options and navigate the system that exists. Getting into policy debates as somebody who needs to explore practical matters doesn't make sense to me. A family needs to create as many options as possible. Having a test score gives you more options, right? Because if you have a test score, you can choose not to send it. But if you don't have a test score, you are now in trouble. Because if one place requires it, you can't send it to that place now. So families, unfortunately, still need to think about the test, probably prepare for it so that they can create options for themselves. Now, if it turns out, and every family has to figure out where they are. If you have a child whose every bubble test they've ever taken in their life, they scored in the 11th percentile, maybe we opt out. Maybe we don't prep. Maybe we just say, hey, those are some schools that require the test that I'm just not going to have on the list because my kid is not a strong test taker. That's fine, right? We've also taken Juilliard off the list. My kids never looked at Juilliard because those aren't skills they have. They are not, world-class dancers. So if you're not a world-class test taker, you take the test-taking schools off the list. Fine, right? But for those of us who have time, wherewithal to prepare, it's better to prepare, find out whether it will be an option, and then make the decision at application time. Now, that doesn't mean I support the test. I'd like all colleges to not require it, right? But for parents, it gives you an option currently. There are a few scholarships that ride on it. Not as many as people want you to believe. 36% of state scholarships require a test. So it's not as much as we believe, but still, if that 36% is one of the ones that I can get, and I need a test score for that, I'd rather have the score than not.
Akil, I'm going to tell you one of my academic, intellectual, institutional fantasies. Okay, I want nobody to get their mind out the gutter. I want to see you and Tim in a cage match, discussing testing to see who comes out. Because Tim has very strong opinions about it. You have very strong opinions about it. I just want to see y'all two wrestle.
But I mean, our opinions are the same.
Tim, what is so? Please, Tim, if you don't mind, 2024. What is your advice that you give parents about testing? Almost automatically. Continue.
Everybody should prepare to take the test, and if you don't do well on the test, there are 1,900 schools that are test optional that you can submit it to.
Got no questions with that. No issues with that.
So I just made up a fake fight. That's all
you did. You did because in 2020 when we started writing the book, I said testing is very much still in the framework of college admission is not going anywhere, and you said nope. All these schools are test optional. We can't say anything about testing. We're going to get roasted. And I was like, no, testing is coming back. I said, what did I call it? What did I call testing?
Oil.
It is the oil of college admission. Like, there are going to be Teslas. There are going to be electric cars out here. The test-free, the test optional schools. But by and large, most are going to put some gasoline in them. And that is testing.
That makes College Board mobile.
Exxon, Shell.
And wait, what's the Gulf that they polluted?
Yeah. I hear you.
Hey, so Sharif, now that we got them worked up, now
hit them. Now we hit them.
So
it's like drink champs.
Yeah,
he's thrown back a few now.
Yeah, now that we got them loosened up a little bit.
Okay, I got you. But I got you, son. Give
it. So let's alley. I want to throw you the alley. Now that we got them.
I see it. All right, Akil. As we are at that time of year when a lot of rankings are coming out, how much merit should families and educators put into these rankings? Yeah, flush that, son.
You know what's funny? In the last year, I've learned a lot about rankings. Let me start there. And
that sounds like a disclaimer, just so you know, but continue.
Most rankings are trash. No. Let me not say that. Let me say it better. I'm trying to give you what you want. Rankings are trash.
Come on, give me what I want. Tell the people how you really feel.
U.S. News rankings are trash. Many other rankings aren't. Any rankings that go best is probably trash.
Hey, relax. I got a series on that.
Best at this is probably a little bit better. rankings need to be very clear what they're telling us. If they're not, then what you're doing is you're reading Yelp reviews and trusting them. Right? That's what it is. It's a Yelp review. It is somebody's opinion, right? And it's kind of worse than a Yelp review because Yelp reviews, we know they're BS. We read them and the dude is like, I didn't like this mattress because it looks like an ice cream sandwich. And we're like, what? Like one has nothing to do with the other, right? Like the delivery guy was rude to me, so I didn't like this product. I'm giving it a 1. That's kind of what US News is. They are saying, how much money does this place have? Therefore, it's the best. Well, you know who immediately has an advantage in the money game? The colleges that have been around the longest. So US News to me is let me even clean up my trash comment. It uses factors that do not evaluate the quality of education. They evaluate the historic resources and reputation of the institution. Okay. Now, there is some overlap between those two things, but I think it is a disservice to the public to pretend you are ranking quality of education when in truth you're ranking resources and reputation. So that's the problem with rankings. Now, the other piece of I will say about rankings is same thing as reviews. If you want a quick, dirty, crowdsourced, is this kind of good? That's what they're giving you. Right? So if a school falls in somebody's top 100 somewhere, it's not bad. It's not, I don't even care whose top 100 it is. If it falls in somebody's top 100, like if you don't quibble about where in the top 100, 200, 300 it is, you're probably fine. Because you're saying that school is in the top 10% of colleges. Cool. So I'll even take a top 500, right? Now, if you're trying to find out the best possible education for my child who wants to pursue a medical degree, US News is not telling you that. If you want to find out the most affordable college for your child, US News is not giving you that.
I mean, they have subset rankings. And again, let's not pick on US News. Everybody's got a rankings. And again, I find these
US News is the worst because it's the biggest.
Okay, that's fine.
It's the worst because it's not honest and it's the biggest. Right?
You're entitled to your opinion. Forbes has theirs. Niche has theirs. Everybody's got theirs. And I find it fascinating because not that I learned about new schools per se, but I try to cross-reference different rankings about different information. Again, using my own experience or expertise, shape my own opinion. But I do like how they share their opinion about several schools that I can then go investigate. And I think that's what you're saying is that you want more families to look at certain credentials about the academic experience of the school. You don't want to be just a Yelp review. Let this school, make you curious, but then you got to do the deep dive to figure out if it's right for your kid and their ambition.
It's a Yelp review where you have to click 7 times to find out how the reviewer decided on their review.
Okay, fair enough.
What makes it worse is that you don't know how you got to that 2-star. You just know it's a 2-star. And I think with the size and weight of US News in this conversation, they have a responsibility to the public that they are not following through on.
Gotcha.
Sounds like you're a fan of rankings, Shereen. So you think they have some value?
I think they have value in exposing me to filter out what I believe to be true. So I like the fact that it catches my
attention. Wait. Did you just say they have value because they confirm your opinion?
No, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. What you heard me say was, I like looking at rankings in order to know what the people think. And because so many parents refer to these rankings, I don't want to be dismissive and call them trash. I say, okay, let's go a little bit deeper and find out why they're ranked for this discipline, why they're ranked for that social aspect. I like the fact that it keeps the vibrant conversation about a variety of schools alive. So do I give them credit for exposing and good marketing? Absolutely. Do I give them credence into which is best or not? I have an opinion about that, and I'll determine that on my own. So there.
So I think you're coming from a really informed position where you have
correct.
So the problem that I have with the rankings isn't that they evaluate; it's that they present an opinion. Like US News is literally basically one dude, Bob Morris.
I know. I heard the interview. I heard him.
Who chooses the data he wants to include in the rankings, and then tells us this is objective.
Understood.
That's
Understood.
the problem to me, right?
I'm aware of the process.
Because it presents it as if it is pure objective mathematical evaluation, whereas it's not. And I think that most of the public isn't doing what you're doing, saying that's someone's opinion. I can use that to guide my own. I think most people are making decisions based on those rankings.
Yes.
And I think the ranking I like, one ranking I like better, right? I like Third Way. They do a social mobility ranking. I even like the New York Times thing, even though it's a bit reductive. New York Times created this thing where you can create your own weighting to each factor. That's a ranking that encourages thought, not acceptance of somebody else's opinion. So I like the New York Times ranking for that. I like the Money Magazine ranking, which allows you to shift the weight of stuff.
Right.
I like education
scorecard. Right. There's information that you could put price over prestige, or you said something, resources versus something. Yeah.
Education Reform Now tells you what their ranking is. This is a ranking of social mobility elevators. They help move you from one income bracket to the next. That's a really clear metric, right? It's not this vague bestness, which I find to be problematic because that says nothing.
So, are there any rankings that you know of that prioritize or even factor diversity into their equation?
Washington, I don't know who uses the phrase diversity and tries to quantify that. The places I think of are usually the social mobility places. Those are the ones that come to mind. Washington Monthly does something there. Education Reform Now, Third Way, all of those rankings are using some kind of social mobility, which usually incorporates some element of diversity and socioeconomic movement in their evaluations.
So Tim, what's your stance on that? Again, we have to do a deep dive into this Third Way thing. This is new to me. How do you feel? I know you have take a pretty hard stance on how HBCUs are ranked amongst the national population. I mean, is there anything you want to add about HBCUs in particular as pertains to rankings?
No, I think it goes along with what Akil was saying, that it's based upon history, prestige, and other factors that I don't think influence the day-to-day life. And so because the largest endowment of an HBCU, I believe, is Howard, is like $900 million, they're never going to make a top 100 list. But is that to say they're not as good as many of the schools that are on the list? I don't know. I just think there's a big disadvantage that a lot of schools have, not just historically Black college universities. A lot of schools have that are providing a great education that often are overlooked by parents because they're not on the list.
Right.
And so that's, where I find it problematic, because, in my opinion, anybody who puts merit in rankings, U.S. News and World Report are the ones that are coming out a lot. Princeton Review, all those things are saying to a large fraction of the world, Morehouse College ain't good, Howard ain't good, North Carolina A&T ain't good. You need to go to a school that is more than likely a predominantly white institution to get a good education. And that's what they're sending to the world. And that's just very unfortunate, in my opinion.
Salute. I can hear that. I can hear that. And I appreciate both of y'all for giving me some food for thought as I, kind of do my own advising with families. As again, this is the time of year where we're all learning and forming our opinions about not just certain schools, but again, so much is changing that we have to stay current. So
here's the other thing I would throw out with your rankings. Look at the methodology. They should have a clear methodology, and you should look at it. It should make sense. Princeton Review's methodology, they choose schools they're going to survey, and then they survey them and put them on their ranking.
Yes.
So they've pre-selected who's ranked.
But Akil, you got to give the babies baby food. I mean, the parents, students, that they hear about these things. You rather just give them the information about the schools that they're familiar with for whatever reason than trying to pull out obscure things that isn't going to whet their palate just because we are a country that is filled by marketing and social media.
I don't think that's true. I don't just concede that. I think it is your responsibility to especially when you're in a position of power. And like maybe the first Prince Review ranking, I get why they do that. As you gain marketplace power and prestige, a responsible individual, to me, takes their public responsibility seriously, right? I'm not going to tell somebody, don't go to MIT, even if I criticize a school, right? I'm trying to make it really clear why I criticize them and that I'm talking about a particular process, not the institution, right? MIT is a fabulous education, no matter what they do in admissions. They can require everybody to do a hula hoop to get into MIT. I don't really care. I just don't want MIT to be like, to come here, everybody needs to do a hula hoop because that means you're smart. Because that's not smart, right? Don't tell me it's X when it's really Y and pretend you're doing something other than you're doing, right? And it still doesn't change. Is that a good education, right? So I think that we have to separate. There is a marketing element to this. There is all of that going on, which is different from what's the education we are trying to get. And ultimately, that should really be what we're looking at here, getting an education and then perhaps whatever comes after that.
The economic mobility thing, last point again, and we really appreciate your time and your insights, because again, I think they're critical. We'll make sure you tell the people where to find you going forward. But we talk about economic mobility and computer science, engineering, STEM, that is economic mobility that we are, I won't say we are negligent, but we are being neglected oftentimes. And that's why, people like Morgan DeBron found things like Afrotech. But it is a piece of the puzzle that, yes, we're beating up MIT today, but there's a whole industry of technology that doesn't value diversity in the Black and brown sense. And I think we have to expose some of our peoples to those schools so that they can achieve that economic mobility that we all deem to be important. But I digress. You know me, cash rules.
Absolutely. I do not disagree with anything there. Like, to me, it's, again, creating opportunities, which is why I'm saying, like, prep for the test, right? Because it might create an opportunity that otherwise doesn't exist.
Understood. Tim's giving me that look. You know how when you get accepted an award at a Grammy or an Emmy show, you give that look like, shut up. So
No. Hey, I'm enjoying the conversation. If we had more time, I would poke the bear a little bit more. But you know what I'm saying, we got a whole season to do that. But Akil, we're gonna get you out of here on this. We always ask about colleges, universities. So as you went through this process as a parent, did you run across any school, college, or university that maybe you just like kind of looked over, that you said, wow, this is the place the more people, families that should consider? It's probably not going to make Shireen's because it probably is not ranked. But if there's a school that you see that you like, I want to tell the people about.
I mean, I could name a billion of them. I spend all day in spreadsheets about colleges, right? Which is fascinating. This time last year, I don't think I could have told you anything about Williams or Bowdoin. Right? And I point out those examples because they are highly ranked liberal arts institutions, but they're not names you hear all the time. So I don't think we even need to dig deep into obscure schools. I didn't list a single obscure school, right? Those are schools that probably I should know. But what we tend to know about, and this is the problem I have with some of the rankings and stuff, right? We talk about the very top of the list and sometimes the very bottom of the list. But everything in the middle of the list, right? We're saying there are 1,000 good schools. We talk about 25 of them. Like, how many colleges can you name? So there's a whole middle of great schools that we know nothing about, right? And that is true of me, right? Case Western, I know very little about except it's in Ohio.
Good school, Cleveland, good STEM.
We can run down the list of tops in anything, and I probably don't know number 4 and 5. So I think that's one of the reasons that I don't like the rankings. They often converge on a certain set of schools to the detriment of all the others, right? And so, to me, that's the big challenge. I would love to figure out how do we get better at saying Clark Atlanta is great at this, Tuskegee is great at that, right? All of these places that the AUC just signed that, whatever that super duper tech deal was, right? that if I'm not in this space, I may not know about. Right. So I think the challenge is for parents to look beyond the schools that get the attention, because those suck up the oxygen, and there's 2,000 other schools that should have attention because they provide a great service with what they do.
So anything specific about Williams and Bowdoin that, stood out that you would share with families that maybe overlooked them for any number of reasons?
I mean, the strength of opportunities, like so my son was interested in economics, right? Just the number of, I like liberal arts programs. I think you go to college to get smart, to learn how to learn. Most of the jobs that exist today weren't in existence when I was in high school. So I'm not super set on go to STEM and only learn engineering, right? So part of what we were looking at is strong liberal arts education, but also the ability to focus on these other areas. What I learned at investigating some of the liberal arts schools is liberal arts doesn't mean no business. Liberal arts doesn't mean no engineering, right? Like in my head, liberal arts are like, you sit around and you talk about Nietzsche, right? Like, you don't do no math, like, so, right? So learning what liberal arts actually means was sort of the biggest takeaway, right? And again, I'll put it right out there. I've been around college as a professional for 30 years. So everything I say, I'm saying intentionally telling y'all, yes, this has been my job, and this is crap I'm learning last year. I understand how tough it is for parents, right? Because there's a lot of information to go through.
Yeah, you need a filter. You need a filter.
And there's a lot of I think the problem with college admissions is marketing has taken over education as the focus, right? And so it has become a bit more difficult to learn about the education because we're spending so much time looking at the marketing.
That's a mic drop. That is a mic drop, man.
Close it out right there. That's strong. That's strong.
Hey, man, the man came. Thank you, Akil. You have shared a lot of great information. I think there's a lot to unpack, and we always learn when we get to spend some time with you. So we greatly appreciate your time. Shireen.
Yes, sir.
Gonna see you in LA?
I don't know. Let me say something to my man Akil first. Again, if we don't say it enough, thank you for the forward to our book. Again, people need to know that we've written this book, but we wrote it, in partnership with you. And I always want everyone to know that we really believe that our collective expertise, our individual expertise, really created something that is special. So again, shout out to you in front of all these people who are listening.
You.
No doubt. Yes.
I wouldn't have wrote if I didn't believe in you guys. I didn't love what I learned from you. Every time we get together, I learn something, and that's what I appreciate.
There it is. So yes, Tim, to answer your question, I will be in Los Angeles, I guess sometime when this thing is released, and I'm looking forward to kind of doing some professional edification over those few days. But yes, that's it. I want everyone, if you don't have it, the Black Family's Guide to College Admission, and Conversation about Education, Parenting. What's it about? And race. I want you to get that book. Get on Amazon. You go to understandingthechoices.com. You can learn from us. We have resources. Again, we are here to help. If this guy, Timothy Fields, has taught me anything, is that we're going to make sure we are there for the people, sharing information. So come to our website, learn more. We'd love to connect parent groups, schools, whatever it may be. We are on a mission to help those who need it. So, Akil, you help us in our mission. So thank you again. Tim, famous last words.
Hey, just we out, man. We out. We said enough.
Brilliant. That's real articulate. Goodbye.